everyone, and welcome to the Pathfinder Lair. My name is Drew, and I've been a game master for over 10 years. On this channel, I help new players understand the rules of the Pathfinder 2nd Edition system. Today in the Lair, I will be continuing my Ancestry album series with the little tricksters known as Goblins. Goblins tend to be misunderstood because a long time ago, they used to be the enemies of most ancestries. Goblins generally live in the moment, not really caring about facts or the future. At least, this is how they tend to be. Let's get started with the basics. To start, as a goblin, you have 6 ancestry hit points. You are a small creature. And like most ancestries, you have a speed of 25 feet. For ability boost, you get dexterity, because goblins tend to be hard to hit, and charisma, because goblins tend to have big personalities. You also get a free ability boost, which can be anything except dexterity or charisma. The ability flaw for goblins is wisdom, because goblins tend to be less aware of their surroundings than other ancestries. Goblins get Common and Goblin for languages, as well as additional languages equal to their intelligence modifier. These languages can be any language your GM gives you access to. There are suggestions in the core rulebook as well. Your traits are Goblin and Humanoid, and Goblins get Dark Vision, because Goblins tend to live in dark places, like caves and underground areas. Dark vision means you can see in darkness just as well as you can see in bright light, but you don't get color in darkness. You get black and white. Now that I've covered the basics of the Goblin ancestry, we can move on to Goblin Heritages, starting with the Charhide Goblin. If you are this type of Goblin, you gain fire resistance equal to half your level, with a minimum of 1. Also, your flat check to remove persistent fire damage, which is fire damage that keeps going even after you take the initial fire damage, is 10 instead of 15. And this DC is reduced to 5 if another creature, like another player for instance, uses a particularly appropriate action to help, like dousing you with water. This heritage can be situational or not. If you're going to use a lot of fire, or you think you're going to run into a lot of things that use fire, then take this heritage. Otherwise, take a different one. Next we have the Iron Gut Goblin Heritage. You can keep yourself fed with poor meals as long as garbage is readily available, without using the subsist downtime activity. More on this when I get to my downtime activities video. You can also eat and drink things while sickened. This means that even if you have the sickened condition, you can still drink potions, which you normally would not be able to do. You also gain a +2 circumstance bonus to saving throws against afflictions, against gaining the sickened condition, and to remove the sickened condition. Whenever you roll a success on a fortitude save affected by this bonus, you get a critical success instead. However, these benefits only apply when the affliction or condition resulted from something you ate or drank. This is a great roleplay heritage, but mechanically you're not going to run into a whole lot of affliction that this heritage applies to, unless you eat everything in sight. The third heritage that goblins can take is the Razor Tooth Goblin. You gain a Jaws unarmed attack that deals 1d6 piercing damage. Your Jaws are in the Brawling weapon group and have the Finesse and Unarmed traits. This heritage is only good if you are playing a class that is in melee a lot. If you are playing more of a ranged class, like a Sorcerer or Ranger, then pick a different heritage. Now let's talk about the Snow Goblin Heritage. This heritage is identical to the Arctic Elf Heritage. You gain resistance to cold equal to half your level, and treat environmental cold effects as 1 step less severe. So, incredible cold becomes extreme cold becomes severe, so on and so forth. Lastly, for heritages, we have the Unbreakable Goblin. You gain 10 hit points from your ancestry instead of the normal 6. Also, whenever you fall, reduce the falling damage as though you had only fallen half the distance. This is probably the best Goblin heritage as of right now. It gives you much more survivability, and the falling damage thing is just a bonus. If you are playing a Goblin, definitely consider taking this heritage. Now let's talk about Goblin Ancestry Feats, starting with the ones in the core rulebook. First we have Burn It. Whenever you use a spell or alchemical item that deals fire damage, you deal additional damage equal to half the spell's level, or 1/4 the item's level, with a minimum of 1. You also deal 1 additional persistent fire damage whenever you deal that type of damage. Take this feat if you do a lot of fire damage. Otherwise, take a different Ancestry Feat. Next is City Scavenger. You gain a +1 bonus to use the Subsist Downtime activity, and you can use Society or Survival when you subsist in a settlement, such as a city or a town. You can also earn income using Society or Survival at the same time as you subsist, without spending any additional downtime. You gain a +1 bonus on this check, and if you happen to have the Iron Gut Goblin heritage, this bonus increases to +2. Next we have the Goblin Lore Ancestry Feat. You become trained in Nature and Stealth, or other skills if you're already trained in one or both of these skills. You also become trained in Goblin Lore. This feat just gives you 2 extra skills. Good feat, but there are better ones out there. Fourth, we have Goblin Scuttle. This feat allows you to take a step as a reaction whenever an ally ends a move action next to you. This feat can be really good for repositioning, and it also opens up another feat that I will talk about later in this video. Goblin Song gives you the ability to make a performance check against the will DC of a target within 30 feet. You can affect 2 creatures if you're an expert in performance, 4 if you are a master, and 8 if you are legendary. On a critical success, the target takes a -1 status penalty to perception checks and will saves for 1 minute. On a success, the target takes these penalties for 1 round. On a failure, the target is temporarily immune to this feat for 1 hour. Goblin Weapon Familiarity makes you trained in the Dog Slicer and the Horse Chopper. In addition, you gain access to all uncommon Goblin weapons. Martial Goblin weapons are simple weapons for you, and advanced Goblin weapons are martial weapons for you. This feat can be very good if you want to use a Goblin weapon that you wouldn't normally be trained in. 7th, we have the Junk Tinker feat. This allows you to make shoddy items, including weapons but not armor, out of junk to reduce the cost. It ends up costing you 1/4 of the cost. Also, you don't take penalties when using shoddy items that you made. You can also incorporate junk into items you make to reduce the cost, as if you had spent 1 extra day creating them, but the items are obviously made of junk. This can affect the resale of value of the items depending on the buyer's tastes. This feat is really good early game, but it gets less and less useful as you level up. Rough Rider gives you the Ride feat, even if you don't meet the prerequisites. Also, you receive a +1 bonus on nature checks used to command an animal on a goblin dog or wolf mount. You can always select a wolf as your animal companion, even if you would usually select an animal companion with the mount special ability, such as for a champion steed ally. Lastly, for first level feats in the core rulebook, we have the Very Sneaky feat. This feat allows you to move 5 extra feet when you use the sneak action up to your speed. Also, As long as you succeed on your stealth check and continue to sneak, you don't become observed at the end of your sneak action, even if you don't have cover, greater cover, or are not concealed, as long as you have one of these conditions at the end of your turn. Very good for rogues and any class that wants to be sneaky. It also opens up an even better version of this at higher levels. Next we have the 5th level Ancestry Feat, Goblin Weapon Frenzy. You must have the Goblin Weapon Familiarity feat in order to take this feat. You gain the critical specialization effect of any goblin weapon you are using. Of course, these only apply when you get a critical hit. Can be a very good feat if you are using your Ancestry's weapons. For 9th level feats in the core rulebook, let's start with Cave Climber. This feat gives you a climb speed of 10 feet. Can be situational, just depends on how much you are going to need to climb. If you are climbing a lot, take this feat. Otherwise, take something else at this level. Skittering Scuttle requires the Goblin Scuttle feat. When you use Goblin Scuttle, you can move up to half your speed instead of stepping. This is a fantastic maneuverability feat. For 13th level feats in the core rulebook, we have 2. Goblin Weapon Expertise and Very, Very Sneaky. Goblin Weapon Expertise requires the Goblin Weapon Familiarity feat to take. Whenever your class gives you expert or greater proficiency in any weapon, you also gain that proficiency in all goblin weapons. There is a similar feat in all ancestries. They are very good. Very, Very Sneaky requires the Very Sneaky Ancestry feat to take. You can move up to your full speed when using the sneak action, and you no longer need cover, greater cover, or to be concealed to hide or sneak. Very good for rogues, especially Thief Racket rogues. I will cover more on rogues when I get to my rogue videos in my class album set of videos. And now let's talk about the Advanced Player's Guide, starting with 1st level Ancestry Feats. Extra Squishy requires the Unbreakable Goblin Heritage. You become trained in acrobatics. If you're already trained in acrobatics, you become trained in another skill instead. When you roll a success to squeeze through an area using the acrobatics skill, you get a critical success instead. While you are squeezing, you receive a +4 bonus to your fortitude or reflex DC against attempts to move you from the space you are in. Situational feat, it is good to get another skill, but other than that, it really depends on how often you're going to have to squeeze through areas. For the Twitchy Ancestry feat, you gain a +1 bonus to AC and saves against hazards, as well as all your initiative rolls. If the enemy is using either Deception or Diplomacy for initiative, then you get a +4 to your initiative. Very good feat, especially if you're playing a rogue. Now for 5th level Ancestry feats in the APG. We will start with the Kneecap feat. You make a strike with a melee weapon or unarmed strike. If you hit, instead of doing damage, you reduce the enemy's speed by 10 feet or 15 feet on a critical success. This feat only works if the enemy has a land speed and requires legs to use that land speed. As normal, you cannot reduce an enemy's speed below 5 feet. This feat is pretty decent. Being able to reduce your enemy's speed by that much is a lot in this game. Good if you're more of a ranged attacker and want to get away from enemies too close to you. Otherwise, pick something else. Next we have the Loud Singer feat. You must have the Goblin Song Ancestry feat, which I covered earlier in this video, in order to take this feat. The range of your Goblin Song is now 60 feet, and you can target one additional enemy with it. This feat is just a better version of Goblin Song. Can be good, it just depends. Lastly, for 5th level feats in the ABG, we have the Vandal feat. You become trained in Thievery. If you're already trained in Thievery, you become trained in a skill of your choice. Whenever you hit with a strike against a trap or an unintended object, you ignore 5 points of that object's hardness. The 1 9th level Ancestry feat for Goblins in the APG is the Cling feat. In order to use this feat, your last action must have been a successful strike. This feat requires 1 action. You grab onto the foe. If the foe moves, you can choose to move with it. Cling ends if you choose not to move with the target at the start of your next turn or if the target escapes. Escaping follows the same rules as normal, but uses your acrobatics DC and ends the cling instead of the normal conditions ended by escape. I'll cover escaping in a future video. You can use this feat without a free hand if you use a Jaws attack or a similar unarmed attack that you could use to grab on with. Hanging on in this way prevents you from using that attack. I personally think this feat is really bad because you can't take advantage of your opponent's flat-footed condition. The other players can, but you yourself cannot. I would not recommend taking this feat. Lastly, we have the 17th level feat, Reckless Abandon. You can use this feat once per day as a free action. That's once per day in the game world, not in real life. How many days you go through in a session depends on the situation. When you activate this feat, for the rest of your turn, if you roll a failure or a critical failure on a saving throw against a harmful effect, you get a success instead. Also, enemies and hazards that damage you that turn roll the minimum possible damage. This only applies to effects that happen entirely during your turn in which you activated this feat, such as running through a prismatic wall. This feat is very good. Getting a success even if you roll a critical failure is huge. If you make it all the way up to 17th level, definitely consider taking this feat. And that's going to wrap up this video. If this video helped you, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that sub notification bell to be alerted of new episodes. If you want to see more on other Ancestry, check out these videos. Next week, I will be continuing my Ancestry album series with the Halfling. And until next time, let's play some Pathfinder. 1, 2, 3, 4.